What's up? Welcome to Backend Stuff. I'm Jacob Blitzo, here to help you build tech for the future. Think about scalability, reliability, and cost. If you want to learn how to build scalable, production-ready APIs, hit that subscribe button now. Today we are installing Phoenix and using it to create a new API project. So what is Phoenix? Phoenix is a web development framework that's written in Elixir, which implements the server-side model view controller pattern, also known as MVC. So let's go ahead and jump right in and open up our terminal. So command space terminal, and I'll make this bigger. There we go. Okay, we need to have a few things installed before we can install Phoenix. We need to have the Erlang VM, Elixir, and a database installed first. So you want at least Erlang version 22 or later and Elixir 1.12 or later. And you can check this by doing Elixir space dash lowercase v. And here you can see I have Erlang 25 and Elixir 1.13.4. If you don't have Elixir installed, go check out episode 1 in Elixir Basics to get it installed. I'll add a link somewhere on this video. And you also need to have a database installed, which we got a Docker container with Postgres running in the first video of this playlist. I'll add a link to that video too if you don't have Postgres installed. Let's open up our Docker container. So go to our dashboard and you should see in containers our BSDB if you followed along before. If this isn't running, so it could be stopped like this, just press this play button and it will start back up and your Postgres container is ready to be used. All right, you will also want to make sure you have Hex installed. If you already have it installed, running this command will only upgrade it so it won't hurt anything. If you've been following my tutorials, you should already have it, but just do mix space local.hex and enter, and it will, let's see, yes. And we already have it, so we are good to go. And now we are ready to install Phoenix. And for Phoenix, we need to run mix space archive.install space hex space fhx_new. And then hit enter and it will run through and install. Am I sure? Yes, install it. And now we have Phoenix installed. Now we can use Phoenix to create a REST API project. We are going to exclude a few things from being generated and also add a few things to make our lives easier. And I will run through what everything is in this. This is a long string of commands, but just follow along and I'll explain it as we go. So first start with a mix space phx.new. This is just like using mix new when we were just creating Elixir projects. But this is going to create a lot of generated files that just help us establish an MVC pattern project. All right. So we want to do phoenix.new space and then the name of our project, and we're going to call this real_deal_API, and that's just the name of the project's directory, okay? And then do a space, and then you want to do a --no-install, and this means it won't automatically run mix deps.git and install our dependencies right after we create the project, because there are a few things we want to do. We want to get our Postgres database set up all properly, and then we'll go ahead and go through and install our dependencies. So this just stops it from automatically doing that. And then we're going to do a --app space. And then this is basically just the name of our OTP application. So you'll see this just inside. You'll see an atom with our name on it in the mix directory, all of that stuff. And we're just going to call it the same thing as our project. So we're going to do real_deal_API, and then go ahead and do a space. And then we're going to do a --database space Postgres. And this will set our database adapter for Ecto for Postgres. So it just makes using Ecto when we create schemas and do database migrations. The config is going to be there to make it easy for us to connect to our Postgres database. All right. And then let's do a space --no -live. This will comment out live view socket setup in the assets directory for the app.js. And we're also going to do a --no -assets, which will not generate the assets folder at all. So if we wanted to integrate any JavaScript or CSS, we'd have to manually do it if we were building an HTML app, which we are not. We're doing a REST API, so we're not going to include the asset folder. And then let's do a space and do a --no -html. And this will not generate HTML views because we don't need HTML views. We're only going to be using JSON responses for our API. And then following that, we're going to do a space --no dashboard. And this, we don't need to use phoenix.thelive dashboard. So we're not going to have it generated. And then we're going to do space --no -mailer. And this just will not generate the swoosh mailer files because we don't need those either. We will be integrating email way down the road in this project, but we're not going to be using swoosh. All right, and then lastly, we're going to do space --binary -id. And this uses binary IDs instead of integers in our database. This is just a personal preference of mine. For most projects, integers will never be a problem, but I like binary IDs or UUIDs just for scalability reasons. Like if you get too much data in your database, you could have integer overflows and errors, but it's very unlikely. I just prefer using the binary ID or UUIDs in my databases. So that is what that flag does. And now let's go ahead and hit enter and it will create our project. Look at that. Pretty awesome. It runs through some steps that you have to do here. So you'll see that we have to install our dependencies and then we have to use mix-ecto.create, which will create our database and do the initial configuration for it, which is pretty cool. And then we can spin up our server by running the command mix space phx.server, and then you'll see our server running on localhost port 4000, but we're going to get into all that very shortly. So let's go ahead and open up our project. So file, open folder. All right, let me drag this over here. Let's go ahead and expand the lib directory. We'll look through some of this. You'll notice there's a lot of generated files here. So if we expand the Real Deal API directory, the Real Deal API web, you'll see a directory for controllers, which we'll be getting into, and views. And our views will just be JSON responses. And then you'll see an endpoint. You'll see the router, which we did do a little bit in our Pure Elixir endpoint with router. And I'll show you how everything is already pretty much set up for us and super easy to jump right in. Let's go into our mix.exs file and you'll see that our app name is right here, Real Deal. The version of our app, which you can bump up as you release updates, and then what version of Elixir we're using. And then down in our private deps function, you'll see a bunch of dependencies already here and included for us. This basically just gives us everything we need to connect to our Postgres database and create endpoints, okay? And we've gone through a few of these and we'll touch on them as we go, but like you should recognize JSON and plug cowboy. And so Ecto SQL helps us communicate and persist data to our database. So does the Postgres X, and then Phoenix Ecto will get into all of these dependencies as we build our project. If we jump over and expand our config, you'll see a config.exs file. We can open that up. And here you'll see that we have our JSON dependency set for our parsing, our JSON parsing, instead of like Poison is another JSON parser, but we're going to use JSON. And this is kind of where you just tell the whole project that we're using it. All right. And then we have a dev.exs file and a production. We're not going to worry about production yet, but for dev, you're going to come in here and remember in the Phoenix command where we said our database is Postgres. Well, right here is a config for it, and this helps us set up and connect to our Postgres database. All right. So what we need though is our container's username and password. So if you don't remember what that's called or what we set it to, we can go ahead and open up our terminal again, and we can do a docker ps, and we can see our running Docker container. And then if we type in docker space inspect, and then our container name, bs_db, you can also use the container ID here. So if you named things differently, if your container isn't named bsdb, just use whatever your name is or your container ID. And then you hit enter. And if we scroll up to our environment variables, you can see our username is backend_stuff and our password is blork_erlang. All right, cool. So let's go back into our project. And now we want to set our username to backend_stuff and our password to blork_erlang and save it. And now we can go back to our terminal and we can install our dependencies. So let's do a mix deps.git, and this will, it helps to go into our project. So cd the real deal, if I know the name of our project, I guess, ls cd, real deal. All right, so we cd into that. And then now we can do our mix deps.git, and it will install our dependencies. All right, there we go, nice and quick. And now we can do since our config file is set up to connect to our database, we can do a mix space ecto.create, and this is going to create our database. It compiles the project as well. All right, and our database has been created. And if you want to just double check, we can do psql space -U, and we can do backend stuff. And then we can type in our API here, which is the real deal API_dev, which is the name of our database. Let's just double check that by going into, so real deal API dev right here. That's our database we just created. And this should allow us to connect to it. We need to go into our dashboard. And we can go right here, go into this terminal. And if we do psql-U, and then backend stuff is our username. And then we're doing real_deal_API_dev. And we are in our database. So that is cool. We don't have any data in here, so I can't show you how to access tables or anything, but we successfully logged into the database created on our container. So that's pretty awesome. All right, we can exit out of that. Well, let's see if everything runs. We can do mix space phx.server, and now our server should run on localhost 4000, which is pretty cool. Let's just go to localhost 4000, and you'll see that I just hit an endpoint, but no route is found. And you'll see a Phoenix dashboard just telling us no route is found. So I'm just going to go back into our VS Code. And what we're going to do real quick is if we went into router You'll see it's a little different. This is actually allowing us to route through /API. And then we'll also be doing some authentication on here, which makes it really cool. But what we're going to do just to make like a little endpoint so we know our server works, we're going to create a default controller. If we just right click the controller directory right here and say new file, and let's do default underscore controller.ex. And then if we come in here and just do def module, come on, autocorrect for me, man. There we go. And then we create that, and it's just the real deal API web dot default controller. And then we want to use the real deal API web and controller. And what's happening here is a few generated files came up for us. And if we went into this file right here, real deal API underscore web, you'll see that there's a few functions, and one of them is called controller and one's called view, router, and channel. And this just makes us able to import all these things to whatever file we create really easy. So any controller file, we just import everything the same way, just like this. So that's pretty cool. So we don't even have to think about it. And all this stuff was generated for us. So we have access to plug and our connection and things like that, which we'll get into down the road. But for now, just know that that's just importing a bunch of things from one spot, so we don't have to do it in every controller file that we create. And let's just make a simple function here. And it's going to be def index, opening parentheses, passing our connection, so CONN, comma, underscore params, closing parentheses, do, and then end. And underscore params, if you recall, we're just not using any parameters because this is just a little endpoint that tells us our API is working. And we're just going to return text con, comma, and then the text, the string that we're returning is going to be the real deal API is live. Pretty cool, right? And then just for fun, do a little dash, and we're going to import, or we're going to grab an environment variable. So if you do a hashtag, and then opening curly brace, you do capital M, I, and then lowercase ix for mix, dot env, opening, closing parentheses, and then close off that curly brace. This will show us whatever environment we're running the API in. So it'll say dev for our development, or like prod if it is a production server. And this is nice to see just to make sure you know you're calling the right config file. So if we save that, and now we go back to our terminal, our API is still running, and it should have automatically recompiled everything that we just changed. So if we go back to our browser, and now localhost 4000 /API, we'll recompile just to be safe. So Control C twice. Oh, I made an error somewhere. Let's see. Default controller, the real, oh, I have a typo on our import because it's just a real deal API. Okay, save it and run mix server. All right, our API is running on localhost 4000. And now if we go to our browser and we go to localhost :4000 /API, you know what we forgot to do? Add our route. We created the function we want to call, but we never added our route. Okay. How do we add a route? Go to your router.ex file. All right. And inside scope /API, this is where we want it. And this pipe through means everything that we're calling in here. So like we're only accepting JSON will come, which is forced upon this scope. So We could have a pipeline that has some authentication, so we can have open endpoints and lock down endpoints, which we'll get into. But that basically lets us inherit a set of rules. And now if we want to go ahead and actually add that endpoint, we can do a git space, opening quotation, / close that quotation mark, comma, and then we call our default controller, comma, and then we call our function, which is called index with a colon index, and then save it. Why is it yelling at us? Let's go back in here. Maybe we didn't save it. Real deal API, default controller, default. Do I have a typo? Copy. I probably have a typo. This should not be up here. That shouldn't have automatically imported. That's why. Because we're already importing our controllers through the real deal API web.exs or .ex that I showed you down here. So we're already importing all of our controllers. So when I typed that in, it auto completed, and that's why it was yelling at us. So let's go ahead and Control C twice, spin up our server again. Now when we go to the browser and hit enter, boom, we got our endpoint and it's just returning a string. So the real deal API is live and it's on our dev environment. That's pretty sweet, right? There we go. We got our skeleton project up and running, connected to our database, created just a simple endpoint so we know our API is running. And so in our next video, we're going to create our first schema and persist real data to our database. As always, if you need help or want to check out the solutions, check out the GitHub link in the description. And if you have more questions or just want to hang out and chat, join my Discord server, Backend Stuff. That link is also in the description. If you want to learn how to build scalable, production-ready APIs, hit that subscribe button now. See you next time.